This book is a declaration of war, not against social media itself, but against the manipulative tactics that have convinced coaches they need to post daily to stay relevant, against the tech giants who have built billion-dollar empires on the backs of entrepreneurs and creators who will never see a cent of that revenue. This is a stand against the greatest scam ever perpetrated on the coaching industry, the lie that more content equals more clients. It doesn't, in fact, it's destroying your business. I decided to open my book like that because I don't think it's any joke that the level of negative impact that this narrative is having on people like yourself who are here to create, massive change within your business, to service your clients in a really big way, and to, I guess, minimize that worth and that transformation and that, massive impact that you do have on your clients down into something so frivolous and, I guess, unimportant as social media posts is actually really damaging on your psyche. And I mean, I've experienced this myself, and I really wanted to, I guess, have this conversation about my own journey with, fully being in this brainwashed environment that is the marketing industry. And I have been actually a part of the problem for a really big portion of my career, because I started out in a marketing agency. So I was immediately indoctrinated by these tactics that have been continually talked about for years to come, and we're still facing them. So having been a product of, one way, and then I guess seeing through experience across multiple different businesses that these tactics were not working for what the founders of the business were actually after, which is at the end of the day sales and transformation, massive impact in what they're doing. It's a really big deal to me to course correct this narrative, and which is why I wrote this book. So I remember actually it's so weird to think about now because I was so young and naive, but I had that, that big red flashing beware sign sort of pop up in my mind when I was quite new to the industry, and I was working in this really prestigious, actually, ads agency. They did content as well, but it was a content and ads agency, actually it was. And we would sit down in the boardroom, and I was wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, really wanting to work this out for the clients that we had. And it would I used to think it was like a creative brainstorm about how we can actually get their sales like peaking. And I remember coming in with my ideas and literally just the response being from the founder of the marketing agency. So she was my biggest mentor at the time, saying her advice to me was to actually create captions which are like longer in length, more space in between each sentence, because if people click on the see more on the post at the time, so we were primarily on Facebook at the time for this client, if they clicked see more on the caption, that would resonate with our software to, report a click, which would look good for the clients. And, I'm all for it. I want to please my boss. I want to be, the keen kind of person in the agency. I wanted to climb the ranks, right? So I'm like, yes, absolutely, I will do that. And then I said, so, because this is, kind of a bit jargony, marketing jargon, but there's a concept where when someone clicks on your ad, for example, you can actually build an audience to retarget anyone that has interacted with your ad to retarget them with a different ad saying, hey, we're on special, or something that's really simplifying, like a strategy that is really commonly still used today. And I remember saying to my boss at the time, I said, so does that mean that we can retarget that person if they click on the see more button? She said, no, but it just looks good for the clients. It looks good in our reporting. That was like the first moment where I was just like, oh, I cannot believe that we are just actually actively keeping up appearances as, we should be leaders of the industry trying to market for the end result being sales for our clients or impact of those sales in those people's lives. Like, this is why I'm in this industry. And to think that, it became like this performance, I guess, or this this false sense of progression for the businesses. It did not sit right with me right then. But I was young and I was like, oh, maybe she knows better. But then, and I'll go through some other events that I've experienced since being in the marketing industry. I think back to that time and I'm like, I should have trusted my gut. And I think as entrepreneurs, we are so switched on as people. We are problem solvers. We are visionaries. And if there's a part of you that doesn't understand or it doesn't resonate with a tactic, I think we've got to really, lean into the self-trust that maybe it isn't right and maybe it isn't probably the whole holistic strategy that has been sold to us. I wanted to share that story with you first and foremost because I think you, unlike me, potentially don't have a background in marketing. So you are probably more vulnerable to these marketing system strategies sold to us online in order to get the result. They sell you the dream. Like if you just post every day that you will, have a successful business. And like, does that actually resonate with you? Do you think if you post every day that you will get clients of it? Because I speak to coaches in these positions all the time. And it's only when they try this and they feel burnt out by this tactic that they kind of think they come up for air and they're like, is there another option? And then they've found me through that pathway most often. Then you look at the content they've been posting and it's got, quite a surface level brush over it that I sort of think, do you really think if you keep just posting a day in the life or you keep just posting, images of how you eat that you will get a client? And they're sort of like, oh, I guess not, because the world is so saturated, because social media feeds are so saturated. The average human being isn't going to invest premium prices after seeing surface level content like that. And I think you know that. I think you've experienced it. I think that you have really actually tried to post every day or some iteration of that. Like I'm saying post and every day as a turn of phrase because it's sort of, that's the pressure. That's the pressure we feel as entrepreneurs. That's the pressure we have on us. And every time you have like a lower revenue month, the default thought in your mind is often, I didn't post enough, or, you beat yourself up first. But it's actually, that was never going to necessarily work. It might boost your visibility and it might like get those clicks, like the agency owner I referred to earlier. It might look good, but we don't care if it looks good, if it doesn't pay us our worth. So I guess like I'm really happy to have written this book to distill my belief down after working with so many different brands and so many different ways. And I guess like my goal is for anyone who reads this book is to really learn from my mistakes. Because before I got here, before I kind of really found a formula that works in this space, it didn't come just by meditating and thinking, a loophole. Why didn't we think of this? It actually came from a lot of trial and error, and mostly error, because what I would do is I would research on, social media and see top performing trending audio or trends, and I would get the founders to participate in them and we would kill it. This is after the agency. So I used to work in-house for 2 brands at the same time, same owner. So I was able to experiment these things across different industries. And, for the marketer in me, I was loving it. I was like, how creative. Oh, we'll set this up. We'll get the shot list all organized. We'll have a photo shoot. Like I loved my little life doing these seemingly important tasks at the time. Yeah, we would get massive views on these posts. And then at the end of it all, like he was in business with his father, this founder that I used to work for, and his father had no time for, the bullshit, to put it frankly. He was like, all right, dollars and cents, how much have you made me? Was kind of the angle. He's Greek and like scary. And I would be like, so fair, sir, like so fair. are tracking the wrong metric, and then became, we started to track the right metric, started to really kind of understand what it is we're going for and stop being distracted by the Gary V's of the world who are saying just keep posting and, actually think about what it is that is going to get someone from a stranger, which is essentially the role of marketing. Someone from a stranger doesn't know you, doesn't know what you offer, into becoming a loyal customer. What does that take? Like from a zoomed out psychological level. And it was this moment where I was actually sitting, I had actually another one of these meetings with the big boss coming up. And I already knew what metric we should have been tracking. And I sort of was realizing, it was a Friday, I was realizing, oh God, I haven't really made as many sales as I know he would like. And I was like, what a sham of a human being I am. I took the weekend and I was really afraid of this meeting I was going to have with him because he's going to ask the hard questions. And I had this moment, I took took myself off social media for the weekend and I just spent time in nature because I was quite nervous about this speech and I just knew I didn't want to be overstimulated. And it was in this time where I did actually listen to podcasts and I was on walks, so I was hiking and I was listening to podcasts, and I was like, in this moment, I'm like, wow, I have just fully transformed in this, hour hike. I have listened to this person. I have been entertained. I've been engaged. It has been this intimate experience, and I found myself looking for the next episode, for a way to connect deeper with this person. And I was like, that is what I want brands to create. This is what I need my businesses that I'm working for to have the effect on their audience, because from there, you're so much more willing to invest in somebody's offer, right? Because you've built this relationship, and it kind of ding dong really light bulbed in my mind at that time. Now, this was, of course, over 6 years ago when the podcast industry was nothing like it is today. It was not a video optimized space. There was no brands doing it. It was more of a celebrity or influencer thing. Like Joe Rogan was the present guy who is operating in the space, and not many others, to be honest with you. But I thought, why am I chasing anything but connection with an audience? Like, we can have visibility, but without connection, they're not going to be, inspired to take the next step. So when Monday came around for me to actually have this meeting with the big boss, instead of focusing on the metrics we didn't meet, I came in and I pitched a long form first strategy to him and sold him on this idea that what's required for customer buy-in. And I sold it from that point of view of like an intuition, a feeling that I think this is going to work. And mind you, this business at the time was actually a storage company. So not interesting and not cool, but a lot of stories to tell. So I came up with this concept. We built this brand and it was called Make Space to Move Freely. And I was like, but how can we show that in our content? Everyone else in the industry was posting that they sell boxes. It was a price fight, basically. We sell these size sheds for this amount, and it was this price war against like different storage companies, and that was the extent of content. And I was like, no, we have an opportunity to showcase stories within our facility of the people who store here, not about the storage. No one gives a fuck about the storage, but what the storage allows these people to do. And, it allowed us to showcase people like who would store their boats and them going out and actually catching these massive fish. Like, wow, we did that. And I remember like a caravan couple that we followed around, and it was one of the best performing piece of content that we put out as a brand at that time, because it was real, right? And I think, again, like this was years ago, like people weren't doing this, but the principles of what I'm talking about are so true and even more true today, that instead of creating content about you, about your service, you need to be creating content about the transformation that you offer, like the storage company. Like, it's not about your method, Your audience doesn't want to hear about your method or the way you do things, not about the how, but rather the transformation that your how will do for them, and making your audience the centric part of your content. But what I guess you battle with once you have these like initial realizations is you then go to create this content on the existing platforms that you're present on, and you figure out pretty quickly that it's quite challenging to distill the depth of what you do as a coach, as a transformational facilitator in your space into a, static image or graphic or, 30-second reel. It's actually quite challenging because these platforms don't, I guess, prioritize depth and space. They want consumption. They want fast consumption because the people who created TikTok got the model off the people who created pokies, like gambling. And do you know what pokies do best? They keep people there. Bang, 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 just wasting their money, wasting their time, wasting their lives away on those machines. This psychology is what was taken into these short form platforms. So you've got to acknowledge, as a business owner, if you were wanting your platforms for a business asset, that you need to be creative with the attention that you do gain. Like, can you get these people off those short form platforms that were not built to build your business? They were built to keep people passive in their reptilian mind so they can just keep consuming. So, as mentioned in the book, the tech billionaires keep profiting because they make their money on amount of people on their platforms so they can sell that ad space. So I think it's like such an important fundamental truth for us as business owners to recognize, and then get quite strategic about, how we convey what we do. This is sort of the origin of what has now been listed out in the content exit. There's nothing quite like spending hours and hours of your time creating a reel or a couple of reels only to go live and one of two things happen. Number one, you don't reach nearly as many people as you intended, like maybe 50 to 200 people actually saw your post, which means you probably got under 10 likes and maybe one comment from people who you already know and they don't necessarily want to buy from you, but they're your supporters. Or you've nailed your viral formula, you've followed that, and you get massive exposure on that one piece of content, but you're still wondering, well, where's the sales? Like, why is it that these people still aren't investing in me? And there's a couple of things to acknowledge in that. Number one is people need, especially if you're in the premium offer space and like the education business where you actually offer something that is quite intangible, like you're not actually able to see it showcased in content. Like if you had a really cool hair clip, or I saw the other day some business owner was advertising or making content about her high heels that went to flats, and how great would it be to have that visual aspect to your content, so you could just be like, here's what I do. And for product-based businesses that have that real visual buy-in, short form content can really add up, because once people get as much exposure to it as possible, they have a problem that they need solved, aka I really want to go out tonight, but then I don't want to have to be in my heels all night. Then they know that they're going to invest in that product because they've seen it over and over again. But for people like you who are less tangible than that, you're doing a hell of a lot more transformation. It's not as simple as a more comfortable night out. You're literally changing lives, you're improving relationships, you're transforming businesses, you're doing this massive, massive kind of thing, and yet you're the one struggling to convey that message on content. Well, that's because it's a different model. You need to be following a different practice. And to do that, in my experience, after figuring out the secret sauce that I talk about in the book and work with clients every day on, it's a way simpler model than trying to work out how to boost your visibility through short form content. It's actually a much more natural strategy, because it involves you just simply sitting in front of a camera with a microphone and distilling your wisdom in a way that you already do every single time you're speaking to clients anyway. So it's very natural. But then, like, I guess the secondary part to it is actually having the awareness of how you can leverage that content to the best of your ability. And that's, you know, I speak about it in the book, but it's also stuff we work with clients all the time, because I think that, you know, I had a call with a client. She had actually read the book. So she had the foundational knowledge. She was nodding along. She'd resonated with a lot of it. But when we jumped on a call together, she was like, I think my audience just sees me as a colleague or a friend. And she was struggling to get that real authority out there. And she'd actually gone ahead and started a long-form content system like the one that I put into the book, and yet was still facing a little bit of resistance from her audience to actually buy in. And it was really simple for me to be able to give her the 2 refinements required to flip that completely. And I'll share them with you now. You don't want to take your short form psychology into a long form recording, because the reason why long form works as a conversion tool for businesses is because it gives you the time and the space to speak directly to your ideal client. So if you've got someone sitting down like you are with me, you have the ability to, you know, how this whole narrative about like you need to capture them within the first 3 seconds of your reel in order to keep them engaged. In long form, you need to actually take the time to be the doctor of the content. And by that I mean, like, instead of quickly getting through what you need to get them engaged, you want to flip it on its head and actually talk into their symptoms and take the time with them to make sure that you're actually making them feel seen and putting your transformation, what you do, your method into language that they resonate with, understand, and will ultimately cause them to purchase from you. So the example I use and why I referenced the doctor before is because if you're a doctor and you're creating content about eczema and what causes eczema and how to fix eczema, then that's great for the medically educated. But what about the people who have just got a rash on their arm and they're finding it really itchy and uncomfortable, and it just appears sometimes and they have no idea why? If you're in a position where you have eczema and you've never heard about eczema before, like your clients often probably haven't heard about the intricacies of what you work on behind the scenes within your coaching containers, you need to actually take the time to speak into the symptom of what they're experiencing so they feel like they're resonating with it before you go in about how to heal it. And I see this all the time when people do come into the long form world. They tend to really spend a lot of time on, I guess, like giving tips and taking the how and going into their content and really explaining all this stuff and using jargon. Really, it's jargon. Like, it doesn't feel like jargon because it's everyday words, but just because you're using everyday words doesn't mean you're not using jargon, because you've got to understand from your audience's perspective, all they know is the symptom that they're experiencing, and it's up to you and your content to fill the knowledge gap between what they're experiencing, the diagnosis of their problem, before you can even engage them in a conversation about you being the solution. That is the biggest opportunity that long form content actually offers you. And it's more time with you as well. Like, again, once you read this mathematics in the book, I think it's like very, very, very early on in the book, because I think it's the most important thing for people to understand when they're trying to figure out how is it that you can actually start to get clients from your content. I talk about in the award-winning book, Oversubscribed, how Daniel Priestley proved that strangers need 7 hours of meaningful interaction before they trust someone enough to buy. So if you think about that, and there's also so much data to back this up. So before I get into the mathematics of what that actually means, I just would really like to point out what I love so much about that finding from Daniel Priestley is that it wasn't found from a marketing standpoint. It was actually, he drew on, I can't remember her name, got it in my notes, but a psychologist that had done the research on how long it takes for a stranger to become friends, and he built on that research to come up with this number. So if you think about it, it's not like, because it's so common in this day and age for, you know, there to be so much bias in the advice that is out there when it comes to your marketing. It's like, if one person built a platform this way, they'll say, this is the formula to creating a platform with this amount of followers. Or there's anecdotal research all around us, and people really leverage it in their approaches when people are trying to assist people in their marketing. But I think this particular stat meant so much to me because it was rooted in psychology and not in the online space of like trying to prove a point of why someone's way worked. So there's that. And I also found further research from that point that Google did a massive study on how long it actually takes people to make simple investment choices like choosing a restaurant. And even in their findings, they found that it took hours of interaction before they were confident in choosing a restaurant, something as simple as a restaurant. So if you think about it, if it takes that sort of amount of time to inform the purchase decision of a steak or a bowl of pasta, how long do you think it would realistically take an ideal client like you that you're selling to invest in you? At least 7 hours, right? It makes sense. But, and I say that because it's like, what in your gut feeling do you feel? Like, because this is just back to that agency experience that I had where I second guessed myself in that moment. I'm like, oh, I have a feeling that's not quite right. But I was like, oh, I don't know any better. I'm new here. And to a point, you got to just do that when you're young and in a new industry. But I also think there's something to like listening to your gut, as especially as an entrepreneur. Like, you're a switched on person. You know what's up. But anyway, the mathematical breakdown of the alternative approach, if just say we were doing like a standard 15 reels. I've heard that the new best standard at the moment is 7-second reels recently, but I did the maths in the book on the 15. So to get 7 hours of content, if you were doing a 15 reel approach, it would be 1,680 posts. And that would mean if you were posting every single day, that you'd have to do that for 4.6 years of posting just to convert, you know, the one audience member that may have found you on day one of the 4.6 years. So you think about your situation now of like, you know, you're trying the approach of posting as much as you can in order to get those clients. You could probably start to understand why you aren't seeing that, you know, business growth associated with your efforts in marketing when you really break it down to like, oh, wow, okay, I'm playing a really long-term game if I'm going to go for the short-form content approach. Now, I'm not against short-form content because it is such a great exposure tool, but from my perspective and why I listed like a long-form first approach system in my book is because it's more value, more bang for your buck. As a founder, you're not just the marketer. In fact, shouldn't really be your number one focus. Your number one focus should be the service you provide for your clients. So when your marketing and your social media becomes this all-encompassing and, you know, really big job that actually, you know, takes away from what you signed up for, the impact you really want to make and the whole reason you're here, it's just not quite sustainable. And you might be able to do it for a period of time, but you will burn out. I burnt out time and time again. Like, I spent 4 years trying this approach. And then it wasn't until that weekend that I was like, this approach isn't working. I've worked in 2 agencies and I've been working in-house in marketing, following those practices that I was told, following Gary Vee all this time, and I'm not reaching the objective that the founder wants, which is sales. Why do I keep following this approach? And I would just be in this cycle over and over again. Then I realized I wanted to play a different game. I wanted to think about the one person who I have found the visibility not be the issue. If I had that one audience member and they were exactly my ideal client, what would they need to hear, see, know, understand, experience, feel to go from someone who's seen me to someone who's buying from me? What do they require? And that's where the long form idea came from. Started it out from a storage company, tried it again for a local pottery business. I then was able to take my own business from earning 0 to 6 figures within the year. It was when I actually switched from what I had been doing all these years, what everyone said to do, and go into a completely counterintuitive at the time approach where I was long form and talking to that one person. And there's definitely been some trial and error about like how to position, the way you speak, which is why I've found so much joy in building out systems for the people who I work with, in my own business now. You can take what you do and turn it into a language that your audience wants to listen to, understand, and engages with really simply. So it's really been great to have worked on that through my own experience. And now after really nailing that and then being like, okay, well, this works. It's worked for these brands. It's worked for myself. Actually being able to deliver that to so many businesses across so many different industries. And I've really found, which is why I dedicated the book to coaching businesses and consulting businesses, because there has been the most return on investment in this industry than any I've seen. Now, there's always been a benefit to this approach across the board, but the real growth, the real impact that I've seen come from this approach for businesses like yours, I think really just comes down to a couple of things. Number one, other options don't work because of the intangible factor of what we do as coaches. It's really hard to win the game of short form because you're constantly you're giving away information in order to stay relevant, and it's not really about the information, it's about the transformation. And I think, coaches struggle with showcasing that. If you're a fitness coach, you've got the before and after, but you also look like every other fitness coach. So it then becomes, how do I showcase my difference, why people should buy from me, my unique methodology in what I do to actually stand out from such a saturated market. So I think that's why this approach works so well for you and for your business. And it's a really empowering place to be when you step off the hamster wheel content creation method and step into intentional long-form content creation. It's life-changing. It's life-changing because it allows you to speak like you normally do, which means you're not falling into the trap of sounding like everyone else, or now really pressing times. If it's not AI writing your captions, unfortunately AI is out there scripting your reels, because you need to quickly come up with a reel that's going to hook your audience. And this real over saturation of like this formula-based marketing is like, it's just bullshit. And really, there is so much to be said for increasing visibility on your content once you have the substance there that is going to draw them in. Like if you just get them in and they read, a generic AI written ebook as a lead generation tool, they've already heard it before, they've already seen it on someone else's platform, they've already tried that method. But there is a whole energy shift once you go from, short form, quick win based marketing to long form first based content creation, because it frees up your time. It resonates with them in a way that short form cannot. Like when you are having this interaction with me, you can even really feel like I'm talking to you. It's an intimate conversation. It's a relationship we're building here. And when you set yourself up in this way with your business, that's when you start to have people like all the time. They come on to sales calls or discovery calls to me, and they know me. Their walls are down. They're like, hey, heard this episode where you were speaking into this, and I felt like that's what I'm struggling with, which is why I book a call. We don't need to dance around the point and kind of waste time building rapport. They've already self-diagnosed their issue. They already know what I've got to offer, and they're just wondering, okay, well, how does this work? How does this apply for me? And it becomes more of an onboarding call as opposed to this sick kind of salesy, pitchy, hard to navigate, like unless you're in sales space, and you can just really just do what you already do in coaching to be like, okay, well, this is where I would suggest you go, and working it out from there. It's a really different transmission, and it's a really beautiful way to have a relationship start when you've given them access to you, like that, like a really in an intimate way, without you having to burn out and have individual calls, multiple calls with them to build that rapport. You can sit down, share your wisdom once, and build up that library of content over time for them to just take themselves through that cold audience to warm audience to hot, I'm booking a sales call. They're already invested, They already know what you're about. They already understand what you're offering. They're just wondering about when to start and what payment plan to go for. And that's truly what the system in this book offers. And the feedback I've gotten from it is just like, what I've heard is it's giving you guys language to an issue that you've been facing for quite a long time. But not only that, like, it's like, wow, it's not built for me. This isn't this alternative, like, the suggested approach of, just keep posting doesn't feel good for you to do, yet you still continue to do it because you're told that you should. This gives you the first maybe in your lifetime where you're like, oh, that's actually potentially not true. And I think through my lived experience, I really hope that I can be an expander for you to seek out another way that doesn't burn you out. Like, it actually gives you an alternative that doesn't burn you out and actually feels really good for you to create. And then, it's a compounding game, like investing, right? You start to build your content system out, and at first you're putting in a lot of work, and you might do 3 months where you're just putting out consistent content. And, if you follow the methodology in the book, or even partner with us and do it even quicker, you'll start to see that growth really quite quickly. But then the best part about this approach, which I just think as businesses we need to be thinking about in this way, like not just the short-term games, but is this setting myself up for like dividends in the future? Like, you're able to use the long-form content as the input to create your carousels, your reels, like simple, effective, and super aligned to who you are. Like, you're not playing someone else's game. And I'm all for it, and I couldn't be happier to have found this for myself and be passing it on to, some of the clients that I've worked with. I actually have a whole chapter dedicated to some really good stories, because I think, everyone's like, oh, this sounds great, but it wouldn't work for me. And I was speaking to a client just before, and I remember when we first spoke, because he's an intimacy coach for women, and one of the things he said before we started working together was, but for me it's different. He's got sensitive topics, and he's a man, and he had all of this I guess resistance to why this approach won't work for him, because his business is the snowflake business. It's not like other businesses. And it's a real feeling. I feel like because I've worked with so many businesses that have had that feeling that they think their social media is not working because their offering is too woo-woo or too complex or not something super obvious, like, say, fitness coaching. Like, I remember working with this psychology client, and she basically does art therapy. And because that was outside of the scope of what you would typically seek therapy-wise, she was like, oh, I find social media doesn't work for me because I've got too much of a complex offering. this system allows for complex offerings. In fact, the more niche or the more complex or woo-woo or intricate your offering is, the more available content is for you to be creating, because if you've got a knowledge gap to fill to take your ideal client from stranger to wanting to invest in you, you've got ample content to create. Like, it's actually easier for you because once you really work out how to speak to your audience about where they're at and take them through the journey from, I have this symptom to I have a problem because I've been listening to your content, to there are solutions for this problem, to there's this person right here who I've been listening to has been helping me through this issue for all this time. I'm going to invest in them. That's how simple the system is. But it really works for anyone, especially if you're in the coaching space. But the more niche, the better. And I'm trying to find where I speak into the really good case studies that I've worked with because of that reason. So you can be expanded to be like, yes, your business is unique and it is really, complex, and probably you do have different barriers to other people. But once you see how effective it can be for exactly you, exactly your kind of niche, or your same level of complexity, then you won't have that limiting belief standing in your way, and you'll be able to execute. So I had this real estate agent client, and he was getting a lot of leads through his Facebook ad strategy, but because that market is so hot right now, and since COVID it's been booming, he was really struggling with the ability to articulate like why him, and when he started doing his long form content system off the back of what is written in this book, he was just getting conversion, like actually converting, 80% of the people he was talking to into a sale, into an arrangement, working with him. He wasn't just any real estate agent, he was a buyer's agent. So that's a really good example of like a saturated industry. But I guess the intimacy coach is a really good expander for someone who might be in a more niche offering. And also my client Amy, who was a natural birth preparation coach essentially. So she was a qualified midwife, but she had a business that would help women and men prepare for a natural birth in a hospital setting. And that is so niche, man. Like, it's how do you convince people that they even need a natural birth? How do you compete with the big corporations that have, stuff going, which is another thing she faced, like lots of like already existing people out there that were completely different to what she did. Her angle was so unique. It was within, I think it was 6 months actually, where she really saw the clients start to sign up within her business. But her podcast ended up becoming in the top 10% globally. And that's just nice to have, like once you have that asset in your business working for you and you don't have to worry about increasing visibility anymore because you've built a machine that's actually going to already get you in front of people who are literally searching for your content, then you can get back into the driver's seat of the things you really care about in your business and focus on that and go balls to the wall with creating a business that serves you and puts you in the driver's seat and allows you to create personal wealth and not ties you to your phone, and you can have more of an offline approach to your business. And this is really what I'm all about, because I don't want you to burn out chasing a strategy that, in my experience of over 7 years being in the marketing industry, doesn't work anyway, and just allows you to have your time back and, live your life, as opposed to, the performance pressure that social media demands of us. And, just like the constant stress, because let's not forget, like the stress attachment to that type of content creation is something that I couldn't be happier that I gave up all those years ago. And I implore you to do the same. And I just, thank you for supporting me and sitting through my video here and hearing me out and good luck. Good luck in creating your own content exit for yourself. And I do have complimentary strategy calls for anyone who wants to take what's put out in this book and get a personalized approach for you based on your specific business, especially if you're in a business where you might be oversaturated, where there's a lot of people doing what you're doing. So the fitness coaches, nutrition coaches, the business coaches, and you don't know how to actually implement this in a way that is going to actually position you as the number one choice for your ideal client in that kind of saturated landscape. Or alternatively, if you feel like you're in that real niche, that real snowflake style of business, coaching business, and you require a little bit more of a customization approach to your specific situation, then I definitely encourage you to book a strategy call with me where we can look at that and go for it, because they're so helpful. I've had so much good feedback on those complimentary calls, and it would be my goal to see you succeed in a sustainable content system. So feel free to do that as well. But until next time, I will leave you there, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.